Good afternoon, everybody. Looks like we hit a slow down point with people joining, so I think we'll get started. For those on the East Coast, glad that you're able to make it here after all the excitement this morning. Mike assures me that he will not talk about the earthquake. He's tired of talking about it, but he will be talking a little bit about the American Museum of Natural History and some of its infrastructure today. I want to say that Mike gave this talk a couple of years ago, right after he got his CC Star Award, but correct me if I'm wrong on that one. But he said that he'd be happy to talk about the improvement that they've made since then with regards to their network and their computational footprint and all kinds of other things. And hopefully this will be of help to anybody who is going to be going in for this round of CC Star funding. So Mike, I'll turn it over to you if you want to share and get started. And you are muted.
Yep, I was just trying to figure out everything that I had going on here because it was interesting. As soon as I go to share, the whole screen configuration changed on me. So it's good. Okay, so welcome everybody. Yeah, so I know many of you. Obviously, I've seen many of you at various things. But for those of you that don't know me, my name is Michael Benedetto. I'm the Senior Director of Infrastructure, CISO, and Deputy CIO at the American Museum of Natural History. I will not, like as Jason said, I will not be talking about the massive earthquake that we have, mostly because I haven't checked our coronagraph yet. I mean, our seismograph yet to see if it, what it actually registered on. But it was very fun. I was in the basement of the museum, and if you've been to the museum, it's built like a fortress. So everybody's like, "Oh, did you feel the earthquake?" And I'm in the basement of the building on top of bedrock. I felt nothing. So I'm glad everybody told me that we had an earthquake. Otherwise, I probably wouldn't have known. But as far as what we are doing today, as we posted with let me just say okay, knowing that it's being recorded. Can everybody see my screen okay? Am I sharing correctly?
Yep, you're good.
Okay, good. So yeah, just a little bit about what we would be going over today. As Jason mentioned, for the last 5 years, we've been developing a campus-wide research cyber infrastructure as a foundation for researcher-facing technologies, and then looking at how do we springboard this into a system that helps us unify science and education at the museum and really help us fulfill our mission. So we want to go a little bit over what we have done to date so far, but also how we developed our Science DMZ and use it to help consolidate our HPC resources here and our storage resources, and how we've been integrating both regionally and nationally with various R&E services. And then a little bit of future about where we think we might be going with this at AMNH. And then we get asked a lot because we've been pretty successful in the CC Star area about what we do and how we've been doing it. And so we've had a lot of both public and private conversations with various people that kind of help them along with their efforts, especially in small and emerging institutions. And partially that's because when the first questions that got asked when I started coming around some of the national meetings were, well, what's a museum doing here? And they really didn't realize much about us. And, this idea that there's all these sources of data that can be unlocked, that there are great research is going on in some small and mid-sized institutions that really just aren't connected, is an important thing. So we are really, as much as possible, trying to help people get that data out as much as we can and get connected and utilize these resources. So if this is something you're considering, or if you know institutions that are, more than happy to talk to them to help them out in any way. Okay, so for those that don't know me much, this is my contact information. If you scan that QR code, it'll give you all my contact, my email, my cell phone, my dog's name, probably, whatever it is you need. But as I said, I'm the CISO, Deputy CIO, and Senior Director of Infrastructure at the Museum of Natural History. I'm the co-PI on 3 successive CC Star Awards, 1 in the network area, 1 in the compute area, and 1 in data storage. And we are currently looking at some opportunities for the current solicitation that's out. So we'll be seeing what more we can do with this and other NSF programs. Bit about the museum. Our mission is to discover, interpret, and disseminate through scientific research and education, knowledge about human cultures, the natural world, and the universe. If you've been here, you know we take up 4 square city blocks in Manhattan, prime real estate right next to Central Park. We were founded in 1869. We're comprised of 45 permanent exhibition halls. What most people don't realize is that we have a full-time scientific staff of more than 200 researchers who are utilizing collections that has more than 35 million specimens in it for some of that research. So we're also a huge data hub for researchers outside of the museum looking to use our collections as a means of scientific research. We also sponsor more than 120 special field expeditions yearly, so we're very active in worldwide research as well. So a little bit about the background, and one thing I would say is if people have questions as we're going through this, feel free to stop and say something. More than happy to answer them in line if something comes up. But we'll also have time at the end. But please don't hesitate, Jason. If you are watching the room and a question comes up, please do let me know. Okay.
Yep, will do.
Okay. So a little bit about the background and how we've leveraged the CC Star program as a roadmap. So most people already know this, but I feel probably just good to put it out there. The current solicitation is out. So NSF 24530 for campus cyber infrastructure this year. There are 2 proposal deadlines, one on April 24th and one on October 15th. And like in the past, it's a program looking to deal with campus level cyber infrastructure improvements, as well as some regional areas. There are 5 areas within this: the data-driven networking, computing and computing continuum, integration and applied innovation, storage and digital archives, and then a strategy area. So these are the areas in the open solicitation. I have the solicitation linked in there for anybody who hasn't paid attention to it. But I think this is a great program, especially for institutions that are just moving into this area that maybe have not had a full campus cyber infrastructure or a really big presence out there. I think this is a great program to do some enablement, and it's something that we've been able to leverage to a great degree. The first one that we did with the campus cyber infrastructure program, the CC Star program, was our networking. This was the basis of our all of our other efforts within this area. This was the deployment of a Science DMZ, and I'm going to get into each one of these areas and how we use this and what we built a few slides down. But we did seek to build a Science DMZ first as a foundational element to our other initiatives. Juan Montez, our CIO, was our PI on this, and I served as the technical co-PI. And then Rebecca Oppenheimer is a curator in our astrophysics department. And among the science drivers, she had a pretty unique science driver, and as well as had been collaborating with us on many different things. So she served as a co-PI on that as well, which not only made sure that we, the IT team building some of this technology, had input from the researchers, but that we also had an advocate within the research areas to really help us get the message out about what we were building, how it could possibly serve the various researchers, and then what to be able to feed information back to us to make sure that we were really meeting the needs that the researchers had. So it was great to have perspective of a scientist and a researcher right in at the leadership team, and we also had some advisors on that team, and we've continued this on with every one of our grants submissions, and frankly all of our efforts is this collaborative capability between the scientists and the IT team. We find it really just definitely helps the conversation, helps break down some barriers. I do hear from a lot of people that there's all these walls between the scientists and the IT staff. This having everybody working together really helps break that down. So the Science DMZ provided us a high-speed interconnect to NISernet, which is our regional provider, got us onto the internet too, and then provided a basis where we could connect up some of our data transfer nodes and our clusters and whatnot. The second one was, now that you have this great Science DMZ, we need to put more on it. And the museum had been lacking was a truly institutional cluster that could be used. Many of the clusters that we were beginning to take over management for in IT had been specifically bought by either researchers or research programs or departments, and were really geared to their particular needs. And but there had not been an institutional cluster where people could apply for time on and utilize that time. So we built a system which we called Mendel, and that was a first truly central institutional cluster, open to anybody within the institution that needs to use it, using fair use queuing to allocate resources. And then the governance team, if we need to specifically allocate some resources for a high priority project or a specific amount of time, that's weighed in by a governance team. That again was Juan and myself. Sam Tran, who's no longer at the museum, was dealing with the platform engineering side of this, and then Cheryl Hayashi was our co-PI on that. At the time, she was the curator and professor of comparative biology research and director of our Institute of Comparative Genomics. She has since become the provost of the museum and has been really an amazing supporter of us, and the efforts that we've been doing. So it's really been great in having her backing and support. And then third, now that we have this gigantic science, pipe to the internet too, and all this data resources that we can bring in and data sets, and we're generating new ones on the clusters. We had no place to store anything anymore. We're running out of storage space, so we applied for a third CC star within the storage area, and that got us just about 3.6 petabytes of storage to start on the open storage network. And that's now being leveraged, and allocations are being pushed out for various users and research programs out there. And again, Scott Schaefer is the scientific co-PI on that. And he is our Dean of Collections and Exhibitions, and part of his job is to make sure that the digitization of our collections, all those millions of objects and specimens that we have, are being digitized and tagged for use by the public and educators as well as researchers. And so this fit very nicely within what we were trying to do there. So as I said, the first thing we got was a Science DMZ. It was a dedicated research network. It has a 10 gig connection to NISernet. And then internally at the time that we built it, what we could do was 10/40 internal connections, gigabit internal connections. We ran a couple of Globus DTNs, which helped us with the bringing in data at high speeds, which we had not been able to do before. We were still doing SneakerNet and FedExNet, and drives coming in and out. So this was Globus was a huge, the Globus data transfer nodes were a huge benefit to us. And in fact, right as this was coming online, the whole world shut down and travel stopped because of COVID-19 pretty soon afterwards. And so this really was fortuitous because it did help our researchers in continuing to move data and do things remotely while they were all working from home. So the timing was, impeccable. We did use this as an opportunity to start federating within Common and use this also as part of our IPv6 rollout. And then, perf sonar, key thing for us to be able to tune the network. We not only were using perf sonar to see what our connectivity was out to the wider community, but we also deployed some internal nodes to see how the network was performing within the building as well. And again, springboarded this into future growth. When Mendel came online about a year later, this was deployed. By the time the equipment came, it was deployed mid-pandemic. The museum had been shut closed to everybody, staff included, except for some security staff, for 3 months at the time that the equipment arrived. So we were one of the first teams back in the building trying to do some work here. And one of the first things we were doing on site when we got back in was deploying Mendel. It had been ordered 3 weeks before the world shut down. It's 22 traditional computing nodes and 2 high memory nodes and 2 GPU nodes. One of the things is it was integrated right into the Open Science Grid from inception. So the second it came online, it was able to be there. We used that to fulfill the 20% requirement giving back to the wider community. And we did that via OSG. We also were able to get through the NSF an allocation from Amazon for AWS compute, and we have the capability from the head node, if the resources and funding is available, to utilize AWS pools for compute with minimal. The bones are still there. We haven't been using it too much yet, or since this initial effort, but the bones are still there, and within a fairly short period of time, a couple of days, we could bring that back online if somebody were to get an allocation from AWS. Again, based on open source HPC tools as much as possible. And this was really where we started centralized support for research computing, bringing a lot of those clusters in. So not only did Mendel become an institutional cluster, but it really helped us expand our services into managing clusters for other people and managing all the resources. So the few clusters that we still had not been managing for people are now, fully part of our system. We did use this too as an opportunity. Tom and the NRP team, when they were coming along with their newer their nodes, had offered us a node to HGPU node here, which we are very happily using on site. So that's located here at the museum as well. And then, as I said, we added the storage from the open storage network. It's 3.6 petabytes of storage. For those of you not familiar with the OSN, we use 20% of it gets seeded back to the OSN cloud. So it can be used by researchers nationally, and then 2.8 petabytes of it is directly addressable here on site on the pods. Originally, when we were looking at it, it was an entire rack full of Ceph nodes. We've since gone to the mini pod node, which is a JBOD of I think it's 106 or 108 20 terabyte drives. It's a little bit denser now if you were to buy it today. And then 3 servers that are managing that. And then our data management is being done via iRods and then Clouder. And then hopefully, as time goes on, we would like to be, really integrating this with the OSDF. And then the implementation of FAIR principles was really pushed out as part of this. This community services and partnership area is simply because we would not have been able to do any of what we're doing without the community. We don't necessarily have all the resources on site to be able to do this. So we're really looking to everybody, some people from EDUCAUSE, but CARC has been a huge help to us and really helping us figure out where we can go and finding resources. Open Science Grid, again, huge partnership right from the get-go. We've been able to send people out to the OSG schools. We've been able to host a couple of OSG groups here. We're definitely looking at working more with Access. The NSF, obviously, for the funding, and the OSN group. Real early on, ESNet and EPIC helped us solve some just really foundational questions about what we were trying to do with the open storage, with the Science DMZ, which I'll show you shortly. We did leverage Trusted CI's capabilities to help us make sure that we were addressing all of the cybersecurity initiatives, Globus, and basically everybody else. We are hoping to be able to get more involved in things like the NSDF and the OSDF as time goes on. Through the OSN, we've been doing a lot with Massachusetts Green High Performance Center as well. So it's been great because the community has really rallied around us, helped us get these things out there, and really knowing that there's a community to reach out to and say, we have no idea what we're doing here. What do you guys think? I have yet to have a time where we have not just been greeted back with a deluge of ideas and support and things like that. So just put that out. Many of you on this call have been huge portions of that. So the way this works out, and I did see there's a
Hey,
question.
hey, Mike.
I see that one
Yeah,
question about IPv6. When I go over to the in the next couple of slides, I'll talk about the Science DMZ and I'll bring up the IPv6 thing then. Just give me 1 second.
perfect.
This is kind of how it all now looks more or less today, connectivity wise. It really has grown substantially. I think if beforehand you might have seen a couple of small clusters out there, Huxley probably being the largest. But things like the connections to our labs didn't exist. Some of the other DTNs were no longer there, nothing with the NRP. So this has all really kind of come out in the last couple of years. So, but now getting into a little bit more of the details in terms of the Science DMZ. So just to answer the question before I go a little bit further. Yeah, so IPv6 is being used primarily on the Science DMZ today. It is not currently on our guest Wi-Fi network. That will change within the next year. So we are looking at dual stacking our IPv6. So we do offer guest Wi-Fi throughout the building. It is you know, an AMNH guest network. If you're here, you join it, you pass a page. We are in the process of putting everything together to roll EduRoam out, and as part of the EduRoam rollout, we'll be dual stacking IPv6. Eventually, frankly, I would just like to make it all IPv6 native. We do have our own provider independent allocation, and so the intention is as part of the EduRoam rollout to really be using IPv6 natively on the guest Wi-Fi, and then continuing to push it throughout the building. Over the next couple of years, we want to make sure that every station here is on V6. And we just were at a training with Manhattan College and the team from Epic and others, as well as NiserNet, and really helped us you know, just kind of come back up to speed on certain things, train some additional people, and IPv6 is definitely going to be rolled out there. So tied into the Science DMZ was kind of some of the data transfer challenges we had. This was a fun one to work on. This is actually one of the first ones that Jason and team and the guys from UCSD really helped us with. We had a researcher, Rebecca Oppenheimer, who had a coronagraph that she built, Project 1640 instrumentation listed up there, up at Mount Palomar Observatory. Was trying to figure out how to get the data back. What she was doing is going out there for a week, collecting up all the data, bringing it back to the museum and hoping that she got something cool out of it. And then sometimes it was a hit, sometimes it was a miss. What we were able to do in bringing the Science DMZ online was we basically spun up with help from the John Graham and the team from SDSC, was to spin up this like a series of DTNs that was sending the data down very quickly to either UC San Diego or San Diego State, both of whom were connected to the HP-REN, and then slinging that data very quickly across Scenic through Internet to NiserNet and to us. So now instead of Rebecca having to wait a week until she got back with all of her data and see if she had gotten anything, she was beginning to work on a daily basis, seeing what was coming out of the telescope and out of the coronagraph the second that you know, the observing window was done. By the time she got back to her office, or by the time she got into her office in the morning in New York, the data was there ready to be processed. So it really did help her pipeline. It really did change the way that her discoveries were being done, and became a model for how fast can we bring this data in. It also helped us with, you know, large data transfers of data sets and data volumes here, as well as sending things out. So this was one of the initial things that we got to cut our teeth on. And it's always interesting when you're talking about high-speed data networking and there's a series of mountains and wireless connections in the middle of it. So, we started really with a tough one and worked our way backwards from there. Now, as far as how we get to everything, this is a key investment that we had made a number of years ago into the Manhattan Dark Fiber Network from NYSERNet. We were some of the inaugural members. So there's a fiber optic ring around Manhattan. And if anybody knows anything about doing any fiber in Manhattan, you better have a really good partner that you can work with on this, because it's the fact that any light passes anything in Manhattan is just amazing to me. I've been in the manholes. They're something to see. But this ring really connects us down to 32 Avenue of the Americas, which is a major pop. NYSERNet has a co-location facility down there. And by using this ring, we're getting direct fiber into NYSERNet on the back end. And we then have diverse paths that go away. So sometimes the east side has an issue, somebody hits it with a backhoe or it steps on something. We still have the west side. So this is, this ring is active in both ways each time. So the reason why I bring this up, which is not so much of a Science DMZ engineering question, but it is something that I find people don't always think about, is the physical connections. How do you get to where you're going? How do you get to the providers that you're going to need? Oftentimes this, layer one stuff gets, missed, and then they run into a lot of problems. So this is something that I do encourage people really think about, not only what your connection will be, but how that connection gets to where it needs to be. So now in terms of how the Science DMZ works at AMNH, it's based off of Juniper equipment currently. There's an MX240, which is our gateway router that is connecting on two 10 gig connections up to NYSERNet, lagged together. One goes to the east route, one goes to west route across the dark fiber network. And then that allows us to really maintain some redundancy. NYSERNet connects us to their R&E network, which is their AS3754. And that connects us then to the internet too, and other NYSERNet members and peers. But they also provide a content delivery network, which connects us to Amazon and Apple and Akamai and Facebook, et cetera. And that's just a smattering of the people that are on that. So this has been a great benefit, because we then have the higher speed connectivity, not across the commodity internet, to some of these cloud providers, which has been hugely helpful in some of our efforts. For example, our digital asset management system is being hosted in Amazon. And we are now testing connecting that Amazon instance back across these networks to our open storage network pods that are on site via S3. And we're using some of the other services up at Amazon. So having a fast backbone connection there facilitated through this, although it's not traditionally I2, although we can reach it via the I2, has been a huge boon to us. We also are running a VLAN through this to Cogent as one of our internet connections, because again, not everybody is on the I2. So we want to make sure we had as fast a path into the Science DMZ for those people that may not be I2 connected and are using the traditional internet as well. The campus network, enterprise network, is connected into the Science DMZ. It's firewalled away. So over here in this campus perimeter firewall has an interface, an actual DMZ interface to the Science DMZ. And it serves two, actually two connections. One, the outside interface is connecting to the MX240, which then connects to a QFX 10K, which is serving as the core. And then there's also this red network, which I'll get into in a moment, which is providing some higher speed connectivity out to some departments. We essentially have two virtual route setups within the QFX. One is the SDMZ external. This is your traditional Science DMZ, which is facing out publicly. This is where our data transfer nodes, our clusters, some of our directly connected lab instruments and lab DTNs, the NRP node, the OSN pods, this is where those are all connected and then are just publicly available out through the Science DMZ in the traditional way that you would expect. That is V4 and V6 directly addressed. So there's a /24 and a /52 assigned to those endpoints. And it is using the ESNet, very standard CyDMZ model there. The red internal, what we were calling Science high-speed access, is something that we wanted to do because some instrumentation and some local systems were still out in departments and were either not appropriate for or could not be moved into a data center that was Science DMZ enabled. And sometimes the researchers had mixed use on those. So we wanted to be able to do two things. We want them to have as fast access to the Science DMZ resources without directly connecting them to the Science DMZ. We did not want them to be, a multi-use workstation or multi-use station that was on the Science DMZ. It's just not appropriate. So we created this separate virtual router setup. And Jason, I can't even recall who came up with the route leak idea, but I know it was somebody on that call. I think maybe it was even you.
I think it was Nick Braulio. He was on that
Right.
call.
So basically what I wanted to do is say, okay, I'm going to use the backbone and some Juniper QFX 5100s at the time to make 40 gig connections down to IDFs around the building and be able to then provide 10 gig connections to machines and services that might be out in a department that can't move into a data center for the CIDMZ. And without this little purple box here that says route leak, which is secured by a filter, the pathing for that would have been to go out the QFX, go in through the campus perimeter firewall, come out through the WAN outside, come through the 240, and then back in through the Science DMZ external. And that is what I knew a lot of people were doing. The idea here was, but what if I just need to be able to move something from something in our interdepartmental labs and we want to go really fast into a DTN, or we want to move something really big and fast without loading down the enterprise network? And so we came up with this idea of leaking these routes between these Science DMZ internal network and the external network. It's secured with filters so that there's no pathway back. You can't start a connection from the external network and then come into that internal network. If you're trying to hit a directly connected Science DMZ host, and you're connected to one of these SHSA switches, you've got a direct path in. You can make that connection, have the high speed benefit without going through multiple firewalled interfaces, killing your performance. And it's worked very well for us. It was an interesting application. I know a few other places have adopted this as a model so that they could have the fastest access to the Science DMZ as they could. And it's something that we're kind of continuing on with, but it doesn't provide a pathway back in there. Then if anything that is not Science DMZ bound, it does go out through the firewall as traditional traffic. So that allows us to kind of go the best of both worlds. So how it's connected now, it's a little more distributed than I would have liked. When we originally started, it was really just our data center 1 and limited data center 2 capability and a few IDFs that we were connecting to. And this was the original setup. When we went to go put Mendel in, though, we just didn't have enough room in that data center, enough power and cooling and things like that to do it the way we wanted. So we had used a room that had been previously used for another cluster and retrofit it to support Mendel and then the OSN. And so that's what's listed as the HPC data center. And that's hanging off that core on a QFX 5100 currently. It's not ideal from the way we want to do it, but it's something that it definitely works and was able to bring us on the line. at the time, this is what we were able to do. What we're seeking to do in the near term is something a little bit more traditional, where we're looking first, just 10 gig is no longer enough for us, especially because when we look at things like the open storage network or the NRP, really the 40 or 100 is where you would be expected to be connected if that's what you were doing. So we are looking at upgrading our connections in the fairly short term to 100 gig connections up to Ethernet, a primary and a backup. The existing Science DMZ will still exist in DC1. The 10,008 will still be used, the 240 will still be used, and some older clusters will still be connected there. But then we are looking at a great deal of expansion currently being planned, where we're looking at a new Juniper 5230, which gives us multiple 400 gig ports that can be broken down in the hundreds, and then really consolidating all of our cluster OSN, NRP, everything that's kind of spread into other data centers into this data center. We were able to substantially increase the power recently into that space and the cooling, so we've got enough headroom there now. And then a second part is to take all the various compute nodes, and instead of being connected to independent InfiniBands, we'd be looking at kind of a shared infrastructure fabric on the back end, running off of another Juniper. I realize now, looking at this drawing, that I've reversed these two, and I'm sorry about that. So this Juniper QFX 5220 would be the front end switch. And then the back end switch, the 64 CD, 5230 64 CD, is what we're currently planning. That would be what's connecting all of our compute nodes in. The idea here would be, as we get more compute nodes and we want to plug those in, we're looking at switching them off to a shared Ethernet fabric, being able to do it. So in the future, just in your mind, reverse these two switches. That is where our current planning is doing. The box down here, this SHSA enablement, will continue on and may even expand into some other areas, some classrooms and some other services. So moving on into the research computing side of it, some of the institutional clusters and Mendel. What we stand with now is Mendel as a general service institutional cluster for everybody. This was funded by the second of the NSF grants that we had gotten. It's a mixed use system, so there are just over 1,300 traditional compute cores. There are 2 GPU nodes serving that up, and then there's also a high memory node and some direct attached storage. It is OSG accessible right from the get-go, so it's been providing its idle cycles back to OSG and OSPool. Ares is an older cluster that is now no longer actively used by our researchers, but is stood up and maintained and still continue to be used for OSG style jobs. It meets in terms of the performance that, some of the benchmarks that they need for the services there. And we've been able to continue on with that. So Ares is maintained as a community resource. We just seed the whole thing right back to the OSG and let everybody use it that can. Cosmo is an educational and astrophysics specific cluster. It was built as part of a program called Bridge Up, which was a girls in STEM program that we had done, and we're now rebuilding it for more general use. Cuvier and Huxley were through our Institute of Computative Genomics. Our ICG, I'm going to say right now, I always mess up the name. Sorry about that. So Cuvier and Huxley are clusters that we use. Institute for Comparative Genomics, I'm sorry. Let me get that right. They were 2 clusters run by that group, now managed by IT. And then we have some from our invertebrate zoology department, Helen Gefgen and Vanier, which is an astro-specific box. So these are all being managed centrally by IT. They're all, being connected, either directly connected to Science DMZ now or will be, or in the near future. Several data transfer nodes being used, some tied specifically to clusters. So Mendel and Huxley have their own DTNs that are tied to their backend. And Vanier itself is both compute and a DTN. And then the MIF DTN is specifically for our microscopy and imaging facility. For all the lab instrumentation, the data that they collect up gets shipped over to this DTN, and then the researchers can move it to wherever they need. And then we have a general DTN. And as I said, we have things connected to the Open Science Grid and the Open Science Pool, the NRP, and then we are now actively looking at things like, can we get institutional allocations or more use of our researchers using access type submissions. So a little bit about our use of OS Pool and OSG. It's been a game changer for a lot of our researchers and also a big way that we're contributing back to the community. So 3 of the clusters, as I mentioned, are directly accessible: Mendel, Huxley, and Aries. Aries being dedicated there. Any new clusters that come on are natively built for connection there. That's just a part of coming online. So we have 2 access points on the network for our users to submit submissions through. And we've availed ourselves of a lot of the training that OSG, OS Pool of Path has provided. So we've yearly sent people to the user school. We've hosted trainings here at AMNH for people in the area that want to come to New York and get trained if you can't make it to Wisconsin, or other trainings that are available. So we are hosting training events. For OSG, we've done them as well for Epic and for Globus. Years ago, we did one for IPv6. So we're pretty cool destination. People like coming to the museum, doing some training, and then going and checking out dinosaurs. And so if you're in or around New York and a training's available, please do come visit us. In terms of things that we've contributed, it's kind of a point of pride for us that looking at the charts from OS Pool about the contributions over the last year, AMNH is currently number 15 there. Contributed about 2.2 million jobs back to the grid at any given time. So we really feel like this helps us support the community that has supported us so much. And really like just seeing that we've had some kind of material impact there. It's been really helpful and something that we really are proud of. We ourselves, over the last 5 years, have used about 5.5 million wall hours of time on the grid. It's been huge for some of our scientists. It's been game changing for several of them. People that thought they were going to need to have years of computational work have cut it down to months or even weeks because they were able to access resources there. We've been able to tune and change, help people with their jobs so that they could get out there. And over the last year, we've consumed about 1.2 million wall hours of time running, just under 400,000 jobs. The active projects are more because it's rolled up. There are many more people than 3 using it. It's just that it gets rolled up under the PI. In a similar vein, I'm not going to interpret the particular charts, but the charts to the left are really what our users are using on the NRP. We've begun to get more and more people using it as a resource, and are really hopeful to get even more use out of it in the coming months and years. It's can be very helpful. And again, having something here is also just a pride of ownership, something that for a smaller institution we really enjoy being part of. And then on the right-hand side are some of the GPUs. This is what Tom provided us in terms of GPU hours and CPU hours that have been allocated from the node that is currently sitting on our network. Again, more than just the clusters that we have direct access to here, it's these community resources that have been really transformational to some of our scientists, and something that I think is understated by a lot of people. They don't really think about the impact these can have on their researchers, but I do encourage institutions to really run down with it. So the third of the grants was, now how do we store all this stuff and get through there? So we recently got an award that helped fund our connection into the open storage network. And for people that don't know, it's run out of Mass Green High Performance Computing Center. The specifications and the management, everything came from them on it. We were able to connect in. It's managed on a daily basis by them. We're kind of remote hands and power and infrastructure here. But then the day-to-day operation of it is really done by that team. You know, their idea, and I've freely stolen a lot of these from Chris Simmons's previous talk. So if it looks familiar and if you've seen some of it, you know, if these look familiar, that's where they came from. But basically that they're looking at data sets as collections of objects that are accessible from everywhere. Basically laying out a namespace. And then, you know, the physical storage is distributed across multiple sites. So it's directly connected to our Science DMZ for the fastest possible access. It's S3 native. Our globe is via S3 connector, which is stuff that is how most people are going to be connecting there. You can kind of do some local compute stuff. And then there's some ideas about mountable file systems. There's different opportunities that they've had here. I realize I should have put this at the end, but one of the ones that we've been using is JuiceFS. We've had great success with it so far. So that'll be added to sort of this listing here. In terms of its speed, there was some concern about, you know, how fast it would be, but we were really getting, they were getting great speed for it. So when we looked at this and said, you know, if we have the internet to access and based on the benchmarks that we're putting it out there without a ton of tuning, we could get some good comparable speeds for what we were looking for. So smaller data sets for the people that don't necessarily have a pod on site, they were able to connect up to allocations from Access. And then, but for us, we became OSN members. And we added not only one, but 3 pods on site currently. We are looking internally of possibly expanding that by 2 more to continue to serve our digitization efforts that are going on. So that it's very likely that we're going to continue adding additional pods in the near term. So for people who haven't seen a pod, this is a picture of one of our current pods of 3. It is the large JBOD, and then 3 servers. The 4th server is one of the other supplemental servers that are helping us with iRog or Juice FS on this. But the 3 nodes or the 3 servers and this JBOD are making up a pod. It's 1.2 currently with the way we deployed it, 1.2 petabytes of usable storage. Pretty low cost. We were originally thought we were going to get 2 pods based on what the initial cost would be. We were able to get 3 because of this mini pod capability. I know there's some thought, or at least I believe there was from Chris, of a virtual pod area, but if you have more interest in that, you can talk to him. Durability, people were asking us, you know, but can we trust these things? It really did seem the way it was set up that we were getting the kind of durability on this that we wanted. We are working now on backup capabilities as well. So we can write these things out to tape or out to other cloud services just to have that. We are looking at things like the Northeast Storage Exchange through Mass Green as well. One of the biggest problems that we had and why we went with the OSN is every other solution that we got, that especially those that were around Ceph, the Ceph licensing alone was going to kill us. We weren't going to be able to afford it based on the money we had. And then the second problem is we just didn't have Ceph engineers. So this is what's running on the back end, but it's being run by the OSG team. So OSN team. So again, their capabilities within the community are something that we're benefiting from right away. We would not have been able to do this in the way we did before, and probably would have had about 1/3 of the storage otherwise if we had gone with some of the other solutions that we were looking at the time. iRods is something that we're now working towards how we do some data management and automation. So we spend a lot of time working with the iRods team, kind of defining what will become some workflows that we're looking at over the next couple of months and year to bring those online. So some of them may be about tagging, some of them may be about sharing, how we can automate some of the sharing of these. The good thing about this is this just really becomes part of some of the workflow automations and discovery automations that we will need to share out the data in the way that we're hoping to. And then we're also thinking about Clouder as a access methodology for people. Another area that we're becoming increasingly interested in is things like the Open Science Data Federation. You know, the idea being that this is a federated platform for delivering repositories to compute in an effective manner. We see AMNH as a place where a great deal of content and scientific data is sourced. We are, with some of the data digitization efforts that we have going on, it is something that's only going to increase and probably increase at an exponential rate. Digitization is becoming a bedrock principle for how do we get our collections outside of the museum. You know, it's wonderful that we can have 5 million plus visitors come visit us here, but there are, billions of people worldwide that are just never going to be able to make it to New York City. But who may really benefit from all the data that we can put out there. So getting that data out, not only to the public, but to other researchers in a way that is helpful and usable is something that we want to do. So we are looking to work with the Path and the Open OSDF team to how can we leverage the services and the infrastructures that we're building to now unlock these data sources and make them available as widely as possible across the network. And so then, kind of fitting it all together, we're thinking about this in multiple ways. How do we acquire data for our researchers, bring in the data sets that they need? How do we share that data back out? How do we share the new discoveries and the work that we're doing back out to the community and have now the community build upon that foundation that we've been building? And so we're looking at this as really an ecosystem that is going to require a great deal of support over the next couple of years and effort from the museum. I'm glad to say that the museum administration is 100% behind us in these efforts. And really, people are very excited about the ideas of what we can do. Whether it's providing things out to people via the dam, providing things out via Open Science Data Federation, whether it's the making clusters available that we have or resources available that we have, being able to use other people's resources and that kind of sharing methodology. The idea here is for a relatively small institution, in the research world, we have this tremendous amount that we can share out there and part of the community we can be. So we not only want to leverage everything we can and provide that out there, but also be a model for other people, smaller institutions who are beginning this CI journey, which is why we've done things like this talk, why we go out to conferences and speak about these things, why our cyber infrastructure plans and all of our previous cyber infrastructure plans are posted online by Jason and the team at the Faster Data site. But really, it's sharing this journey is helping us open doors for other people, which is really, I think, a huge thing. Also, we're just excited about trying all this new stuff coming out. It's just fun for us. So some of the future things that we're thinking about, as I said, is really how do we unlock our full potential as a content hub? For K-12, for STEM education. One of the coolest projects that we have that's being facilitated by all this is our open space project, which is this interactive fly-through model that people can control of the local solar system, and you can fly through Mars and and all of the planets here do really get a sense of what our solar system really is and how it's all put together. But now we're looking at some efforts to be able to stream that to people that don't necessarily have the computers that can run it. Can we run some of that compute locally and stream it out to people? So this is could be very transformational to astronomy education in schools at all levels and the public. But then also, how do we get more stuff out to the researchers? There's more data coming in every day. Some of that would be ingesting large data sets that are out there, but also how do we bring streaming data that might be able to come in from telescopes and sensor arrays and field services that would be out there, and really bring the stuff back in, have it consolidated, processed, managed, maintained, and then shared back out. As I said, open space. How do we stream open space? How do we make it more accessible to people? And then really, how do we expand our main capabilities, to provide the HPC, the resources that our scientists need and others and out. So these are some of the things that we're thinking about in the immediate. Pretty much everybody on this call probably has these links. I just keep adding things to this for various talks that we have here. And then, in general, I'm not really sure if anybody has any questions. I'm more than happy to answer anything we can. The QR code there is our contact if you think about something after the fact. And, please do reach out to us anytime. So,
All right. Well,
if
thank
any
you, Mike,
questions,
for
I'd be more
going.
than happy to answer anything I can.
All right. Well, thank you so much, Mike, for going through that. And I'll certainly make sure those get posted after the fact if anybody wants to take a look. So I will allow people to unmute themselves if they want to raise their hand to ask a question, or you can type it into the chat room. I visited your site, so I certainly recommend that to people who are going into New York as well. Super fascinating just to be able to walk through and see all those different exhibits. Do you have any sort of little vignettes or examples you can give of maybe a researcher that was hesitant to some of the change that you were bringing in, and now they're a full-throated endorser? Any specific use case you may think of that's really benefited from some of the computational and storage upgrades?
I mean, without naming names, because to protect the guilty, what I will say is that some of the clusters that we had were not were built by people, and they were just really hesitant to. Well, IT, you're not scientists, so you don't understand. You won't understand how to do all this stuff. You guys are just techs. And so that was something that we had to overcome very early on. I mean, basically what we did is that's why we started partnering with the scientists directly. We found a coalition of the willing, who wanted to jump in, who wanted to try working with us, or who had resources that they needed. And then as time went on, just as more and more people were working with us, we found that they were the naysayers were coming more into the being in a smaller group and then really willing to jump in with us. I would say that most of our researchers now are really, really happy to work with us, and are interested in the stuff we're bringing in, because really our goal here is to put more into their hands. And I think that was what helped us overcome some of that. Suggesting my colleague is on the call as well. He's really on the front line. So I don't know if he's got one, if he wants to say anything, but I think just in general, the idea here has been putting ourselves out as somebody who's here to just provide everything we possibly can to you, has really been a huge help in getting people to accept it. There are some people too that just I did think this was very funny. One of our curators, who's been around the museum forever, when we started talking about HPC with them, they said, well, that's just not something our lab and our researchers do. And standing behind this person were three of their postdocs who immediately jumped up and started wildly going, don't listen to him, don't listen to him. We need it, we need it, we need it, get it to us. And so, here's somebody who didn't realize that their postdocs were heavily using these types of resources. So a lot of times it's the students, it's the postdocs that are the ones coming to us first.
Yeah, great example. So we're a couple minutes over, but if anybody has any last thoughts, looks like we have
Somebody put
two
in the
got.
chat, how do we participate in the Manhattan dark fiber network? Is it a cost share model to maintain it? And considering this is Aziel Fernandez. So how were we able to participate in the dark fiber network? Turns out we were part of the design team originally when back in the early 2000s when NISONet was putting the idea out there, we jumped onto the design team. So we were the first connector to it. We were the people that had lit up our fiber first. There is a cost to the museum to maintain it, but the cost for us, we calculated it out because of the dark fiber network and the resources it's been able to put into our hands. It's actually been a fraction of our cost than we would have gone under a more traditional last mile type route. As it turns out, the second part of your question, considering possibilities to grow in terms of Lambda using DWDMs, we already do. So there are two pairs of fibers going around each side of the ring. One pair of that is specifically connected to DWDM muxes, and then we break that out into smaller circuits that we might need there. Two are dedicated full pipe, and that would be what we would be using for, say, 100 gig connections to NISONet. And Jennifer Oxenford, who was on the call too from NISONet, I would definitely reach out to her if it's something that you're thinking about if you're in Manhattan. But it was an initial investment, but the return on investment over the last 20 years has been huge. Nick Sultana from Illinois mentioned that 10 gigs is no longer adequate for our needs for capacity planning. How are we looking at the estimates and the inputs across the org from our stakeholders? So part of it is we've been monitoring the growth and the use right from the get-go since we put in the Science DMZ and the 10 gig. When we first started, it was a couple of gig, but as more and more researchers have come online and started large data transfers, we've seen that we're routinely bumping up against the top end of that. And so that's how we realize that we're going to need to make it bigger. Part of this is the ongoing discussions that we try to have with our researchers, not only about what they need today, but what they need 2, 3, 4 years from now. What are the types of things you're thinking about, even if it's just real early, just vision level stuff. We try to continue to have this conversation with them. And then from there, they may not really know what they need data transfer wise, but we're able to see, okay, maybe where are you connecting to things? What kinds of data sets are you bringing down? And then we're kind of giving it a bit of a gut check there. But yeah, definitely it is. When we look out over the next 3, 4, 5 years, the idea is, do we go to something like 20 or 40 gig or something like that, or do we go straight up to 100? And it's looking more and more like going straight to 100 is probably what we're going to need, especially as we start serving out more and more of our data as well, because sharing that stuff back out is going to matter too. So I think it's being very active as opposed to reactive with our participants and our researchers.
Great. Well, thanks for the questions, everybody, and thanks, Mike, again. We'll make sure that this gets posted. For those still listening, next week's talk will be Cobus Vandermew from Utah, and they're going to be talking about the Powder platform, which is a wireless and mobile research platform that is developed out there. So I hope everybody has a good weekend, and we'll talk to everybody soon.
Thank you, everybody.